Oops. There we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Oh, I don't want the Christmas stuff on there. Hold on a second. Good evening. Good afternoon. Let's take off of this. That's a bit too exciting. All right. I hope everyone can hear me. I have my microphone on, so hopefully that is good. Welcome to Morbid Symptoms. I'm your host, Tara Van Dyke, and we're going to get into our second episode of the China in the Marxist Psyche, which is part of a larger project that I am decided to work on called What Do Marxists Want, which is applying kind of a, what would you call it, kind of a Zizekian psychoanalytical ideological critique of contemporary Marxism, in particular, what we call, I'm not sure, popular or the popular Marxism, popular Marxist-Leninism, the influencers, the media personalities, the people trying to do the grassroots. But I mainly, obviously, only have access to what people say and do online. So anyway, let's make sure people can hear me. Hello. Hi. Let's see. Road to Hell 46. All these books are BS. Okay, well, so say you, Fei Lu. Where's your book? I look forward to your counter arguments. Everybody's compromised, lagging games. Okay, who would let he or she or z or zay who is not compromised throw the first stone? Anyway, welcome everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm sure someone will let me know if you can't. I'm always paranoid when I don't have a guest on with me, because then I'm always thinking that maybe I'm going on and on for an hour or two and the volume is off. But as far as I know, the volume is on. Anyway, so here we go. So the title is Socialism, Capitalism with Chinese Characteristics, the Chinese Parallax Gap, and why many Marxists, including Marxist-Leninists, not all, of course, react to this gap not with materialist analysis or the ruthless critique of all that's existing, but with a fair amount of denial, anger, and bargaining, which red flags it as to critique that, to say something about it, is stumbling upon something that's quite central to their identity and project. Anyway, so let's see. Let's start off with a thesis. What I would say is that China and the CCP is socialist and Marxist in a very limited way these days. So formally, yes, ideology, and there's lots of lip surface, and of course, Marxism and Maoism is part of their heritage since the last 100 years or so, and also, of course, the CCP or the CPC is technically a Leninist party. But I would put forward that that there's a reason why there's the space between Marxists and Leninists, which means you can pair other things up with Leninism. And by that I mean the Leninist state, the Leninist party state. So I would say that what you have objectively, at least from my cursory look, and other people have made similar observations just with different language, is that I would say you have a capitalist Leninist party in China objectively, which is not to say, obviously that's not what they say that they are, but I think you can make a strong argument that it's a lot easier to make that argument based on evidence than it is to make the one that China isn't just socialist but super Marxist. They've doubled down on Marxism. I would again enjoy actual evidence to that fact. So, but it's not socialist or Marxist in a material sense in terms of social relations. So it retains the Leninist form, the party form, and Marxist language, but it no longer is attempting to organize society according to move beyond or sublate Marxist social, not Marxist social relations, sorry, capitalist social relations. So to those who are very adamant, who even probably have not, I'm not exactly sure if they spent time in China, not that you have to spend time someplace to be able to have knowledge about it and have opinions about it. I'm not going to pull a Douglas Murray with, have you been to Beijing? Have you now? I have been, but a long time ago. I lived in China, but that was, oh my God, how old am I? So old. 2001 to 2002. Anywho, now I've lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. Oh, yes. So for those who are very passionate about that China is socialist and Marxist, I would ask you what evidence you have that they're not, that the Chinese people and the Chinese state are not ruled by the same abstractions that Marx spent a lot of time fleshing out in his critique of political economy. I would say they're just as ruled by those abstractions as we are. And by me, I mean, here I am in the West. But and that you can call the party whatever you want. You can call your project, your developmental, you can conflate socialism with economic growth and modernization and even poverty reduction, all these things, which are not bad things. Poverty reduction, elimination is not a bad thing. Modernization, not a bad thing, but it's not socialism. It's not a synonym for socialism, but it is in China very much, and has been since probably the Deng Xiaoping period, broadly speaking. Okay, so again, if China is socialist, if China is building socialism, because people go back and forth, the hardliners that it's socialist, it's really actually existing socialism. They're communist, they're super Marxist. What I would say is, well, then they're not ruled by these abstractions anymore. What are they ruled by? Where's your evidence that they've moved away from that? And this gets into what I want to talk about, what I realized, or at least decided, before I get too much further into this, that it's important that I make clear what I mean when I say capitalism, socialism, ideology critique, these types of things, which doesn't mean that they're their only way. Obviously, these things are also topics of much debate, especially people who treat them as historical phenomena, which then, of course, change over time and geographical differences as well. So I want to do that just to make sure that, it's a nice review for me, but it's nice because oftentimes, especially in our postmodern, post-structure or post-postmodern world of, alternative facts and personal experience and, lived experience and individual truths, that what I say what I mean by these terms and what other people mean could be quite different, but of course the term is the same. So that's what I want to do first, and then we'll get back into, so once I do that, go through it. Don't worry with the slides that I put through originally, I'm not going to go through all those in detail. Just want to give people something to chew on or to bitch about. Wanted to poke those, wanted to press those buttons. And a lot of you responded in kind, which I appreciate because it's all data, especially if you're doing a psychoanalytic type of ideological critique. Everything that people say and write, of course, is data. So please continue. It's all good. Although when comments are made, people use this as, of course, I can't micromanage what people say what you want. But I'm definitely not going to read out loud or spend time commenting or incorporating into future episodes and articles people who want to, use this to bitch about something that's tangential. Yeah. So your personal feelings about particular people aren't of interest to me. If you hate Chomsky or Harvey or Zizek, I'm also not interested in that. You want to dismiss them as Trotskyists, then you're a child. But enjoy, enjoy. It's your enjoyment. It's your prerogative, And I will mention this as a anecdote before I get into how I understand capital and capitalism and socialism. Is that it was a while back. Speaking of Harvey, I'll put him up here. It was a while back, and I saw something. I don't think it was on X. And it was one of these like, hardcore, what I would call low-level red now, but that's another thing. And they had this picture of people, these terrible Marxists in their opinion, yeah. And some of them I understood why they would have them on the list, but they had David Harvey on that list, and I was like, well, what's your beef with David Harvey? And it took a bit of back and forth, something DSA, something Trotsky, something whatever. And I don't know if he's a Trotskyist. I'd be very surprised if David Harvey was a Stalinist. I'd bet money that he doesn't identify as a Stalinist. However, after a couple of back and forth, the person admitted they had never actually read anything that David Harvey had written. So, I just can't be too concerned about that. But again, do you? I'm far from perfect. So let's see. Let's get this. Let me get this in order. Oh, I should say two other things, some housekeeping. Some of you may have noticed that I changed the schedule on this like 4 times, and I apologize for that. Yeah, I have, I have 3 kids, but I have a 12 and 13-year-old daughters, and they have made lots of plans and whatnot. And their dad was supposed to be on chaperoning and chauffeuring duty this weekend, but he ended up having to work overtime all weekend. So I had to step in and do that work. And also, so I had to keep on changing the time. I should have just fast forward a couple days. So anybody who was who had tried to tune in for that and found the schedule to be changed, I'm sorry about that. And also, since it is Christmas time or Festivus or Hanukkah, whatever, there's a lot of packages to be delivered because both sets of grandparents don't live. We're the only people on both sides on both sides of the family that live here. So there's a lot of deliveries coming. So if I have to if I have to drop off all of a sudden, I'll try to I'll try to put stay on the screen back in a minute, because it just means that someone's at the door and I have to go. And you know how it is if you have kids, that they hear the door but they don't respond. So if I have to quickly dip out and in, that's what that is about. So without further ado, let me quickly find where I'm starting here. Yes. So what is capital? All right. Let me give my little banner down here. Go away, Medusa. Doot. All right. So, oh crap, it's there. Oh well. So here is, I would hope that anyone who considers themselves a Marxist of any sort is familiar with the idea that capital isn't a thing, it's a relation. Or to think about it as a relation, and that you have the thing where usually it starts with you have money, and then you buy, and then you produce a commodity, and then you sell that commodity for more than it costs to produce it. And then where the expansion comes in is that you take part of the profits, take part of the profits and reinvest it to expand, to both reproduce and ideally expand the circuit of capital. And this is where the growth comes in as well. So I just spread this out a bit. So you have the capitalist, or which would be M in the shorthand. And sometimes they have their own money, but a lot of times these days, even if they have their own money, they will take out a loan from a bank, or they get investors somehow. And then they go and they buy the labor and the means of labor as a commodity, means of production. So whatever it is that you need to make your commodity. And rentiers are in there because oftentimes they don't own the land or the structure that the actual production is being carried out in. And then this produces over a period of time a good or a service. And so then you have value, and then you have the market, and then ideally what happens is you sell your commodity, or you sell your commodity, the good of a service, and you get back what you paid to produce it plus extra. So that's the red little triangle there is the extra. And so, of course, a lot of attention is paid to that triangle. Yeah. So is the economy growing or is it shrinking? How's the market doing? And of course, finance often plays an important role at the beginning of the circuit, but also at closing the circuit. Yeah. So often, a lot of times, you have people who are making the employer, the capitalist who's making a good or service. They have to borrow money or they get it from investors to do that. And then also oftentimes, depending on what the product is, you also need consumers need a bit of finance in order to pay that off. And then you have the distribution. So some of this goes off in taxes, some of it gets to service the debt, dividends, so the bondholder, or so was it? Yeah. What was it called? Not bondholder capitalism. What is that called? Anyway, you know what I mean. Shareholder. Shareholders. Some of it goes off into personal consumption, So when some, I'll just use someone we all know, not that you have to be a billionaire to be a capitalist, but like when Bezos has 4 houses, that's not productive investment or use of his capital. That's personal consumption. And then, so you have non-productive investments, and also a certain amount again goes back into this circuit, and it goes over and over again. Yeah. And so, but this doesn't happen on its own. Yeah. So that's why you have a lot of time that the state and capitalism are interlinked and are developed together. So capital mobilization, labor, means of production, effective demand, realizing profits quickly enough are all areas that can cause problems for this flow or system. And one of the things that the state is very concerned about is keeping this circuit or this flow going. So this is capital, not capitalist. Capitalists are involved in this circuit, of course, but so is labor, so are consumers, so are the banks, so are the states, so is a lot of people. Yeah. And you need some sort of overarching umpire, what you will, or I'll just say state, to be focused on keeping this cycle going. And when something happens to this, so whether there's a shortage in capital or a shortage in labor, or there's labor unrest, or there's a problem in the supply chain, or if things are stocking up, yeah, because the thing is that you can make a lot of commodities, but until the commodity is purchased at its value and more, that's just potential value. Yeah. So all that stuff, all this before stuff is purchased, it has potential value, but the value has not been realized, at least in the money terms. Yes. So there's all kinds of crises that can happen just within this particular circuit. So when I say capital, I'm talking about this process, whatever you want to call it, volume in motion, the circuit, the main circuit, whatever you want to call it. That's what I mean by capital. Okay. Now, in regular speech, capital is also like money capital. So the money that you use to invest into a productive enterprise or to make more money is capital, but just money in the bank is just hanging out, right? That's why interest rates go up and down, to encourage people to either save or to do other things with their money. Also, there's fixed capital, yeah. So oftentimes the means of production are called fixed capital. So all the factories, also the roads and the infrastructure, all the infrastructure, the machines, all this stuff. Okay. But when I say capital, I'm talking, at least consciously, I'm talking about this. Okay. And I would say that this circuit is very much alive and well in China. China is integrated both domestically and internationally like an MFer in this circuit. So that's one thing. Now, if your definition of building socialism or Marxism or communism is having a society or a political economy that's totally ruled by the abstractions, if you will, that this system generates, and you want to call that capital, you want to call that socialism, you can. But I think that I think it's a mistake. But but we'll continue. So, oh my goodness, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I don't know what David Harvey's politics are. Like I said, I doubt he's a Stalinist or a Marxist-Leninist. Maybe, maybe he voted blue no matter who because he freaked out like Chomsky. I don't know, and I don't care, because to me, that doesn't have a tremendous amount of bearing on his contribution. But yeah, he's a professor. He's a researcher. He's never claimed to be a revolutionary or ran for office or tried to become part of the vanguard or anything. But I would recommend his stuff, because he's been revising. He's been thinking about and revising this circuit of capital for a long time. Well, 40 years, 50 years. What is he, 90 now? I think he's still ticking. I think he's 90 years old. So for a lot of years, he's been thinking about this. And this is his most updated diagram, I believe. And I think it was from, I'll just go back here a minute. Oh no, sorry. It's from Marx and the Madness of Economic Reason or something like this. But anyway, this is his most elaborated diagram of capital accumulation. I'm not going to go through all of it, but you can. I will put in the video description. I will put some links to his stuff that's freely available. And if I'll just say, some people, if you know how to contact me, you can contact me, because I have all of Harvey's stuff, because back when I was in academia and focused on urban geography, he was one of my main influences, but not the only one. All right. So anyway, the reason why I wanted to share this graphic is because, again, he elaborates quite a bit on what we mean, or elaborates what you usually, if you're a Marxist, are familiar with that equation of, money, commodity, money plus one. So the capital or the profit. Anyway, so I would encourage people to consider this, but what I just went through is enough for today's purposes. So that's capital. Sorry, one more. Yeah, he also divides up the circuit into three. And again, I realize that those of you who are more well read than I am, and or whose memory is better, I'm not saying he's the only one or the first person to talk about capital in terms of the primary, secondary, and tertiary circuits. So, but yes, so, and the tertiary circuit, I'm going to talk quite a bit about that in a separate episode when we focus on China's urban revolution and the urbanization that's gone on in China for quite some time, but it particularly kicked off in the aughts, in the 2000s, and basically looking at that not as some people would like to say as an exemplar of advanced socialist planning, but in terms of dealing with an over accumulation of capital and surplus capital and surplus labor, and the need for a spatial fix. And so that's another way of looking at the mass urbanization that's gone on in China the last 25 plus years, and also the infrastructure projects. Is you need a place you need a sink for that capital, and of course, the role of the dice becomes: is it going to lead to the increases in, is it going to grow that circuit of capital enough and increase productivity enough in order for the outlay, all that sunk capital to bear fruit? in addition to the fact of it occupying capital and labor that would have been just hanging out causing problems if China, in part, if China had not, if the state had not pushed through this huge, never seen before in history in terms of quantity, urbanization projects. And I will connect that that episode, I think, unless it's going to go too long, to also the Belt and Road Initiative, which is also useful to think of in terms of a spatial fix to accumulation problems or capital crises, a response and a preventive measure. And also the idea that as China has excess capacity, excess capital, excess labor, what are they going to do with that? Especially since if people on the side of saying it's a mistake to that they haven't gotten past all that, they're going to have to, because that's another thing I would say, that's another oddity about this socialism, about this capitalist socialism, socialism with Chinese characteristics in the Communist Party, is they seem to have to deal with the same crises that capitalist countries ran by liberal or a liberal spectrum democracy tend to face periodically. So they face the same crises, although we're supposed to, I guess those become socialist crises instead of capitalist crises, if the CP say so, which is a choice, and I can understand why people make it. Okay, I got a bit. Sorry, I hate when I must have made a decision to change around my slides. Why, Tara? Why? Anyway, I'll just take that as a signal that I've said enough, but on that topic. But I haven't. So I'm going to drop this down. Oh, now I have a big face. Sorry, I just have to find. Okay, well, I'll put this up. So that's capitalism. So we've probably heard about, or there's been a lot of talk on varieties of capitalism, right? So there's variations. So there's capitalism, but there's different types. They're not all the same, which is why you compare them. Because why would you compare things? Why would you compare UK, United States, Japan, China, whatever, if there wasn't something comparable about them? But anyway, capitalism. So Nancy Fraser, who I dig Nancy. I recommend her. And again, someone can tell me that she's a terrible DSA person, and that's okay, but I'm not going to ad hom 40 years. I think she's probably about 80, I think. So what, that would be 60 years of work. Because she isn't member of the right party, whatever that is. I have yet to determine what the right party is, although I'm hunting. I'm on the lookout. I'm open. Anywho, so she wrote with this lady whose name I'm going to butcher, Rahel. I'm just going to say Rahel because the other name I don't know how to say. And this was, I think, in 2018. Capitalism, A Conversation in Critical Theory. And a couple years ago now, I want to say maybe 2 years ago, Cannibal Capitalism came out. And Nancy agrees. So I prefer Nancy Fraser's expanded conceptualization of capitalism, which is obviously related to, but different than capital, is my favorite one. That's just a personal thing. I haven't, read them all. Or thought about them all. However, her thing is that, so the circuit and the way that Marxism talked about it and fleshed it out is not wrong. It's just incomplete, is what she would say. And that's not necessarily a dig, because he only lived for a certain amount of time, and you can't do everything. Yeah, we have to, we have to take up the baton. However, what she wants to add is that there's more than one hidden abode to capitalism. So Marx obviously spent quite a bit of time in all of Capital Volume 1 focusing on production, the point of production, and within production, the point of production. Yeah, and he held a lot of things. He made a lot of assumptions so that the so-called laws of capital or that iron laws or whatever, I don't know, would become more clear by holding certain things, by making certain assumptions. So he made this, if I'm remembering correctly, when he was working through Capital Volume 1, he made the assumption that all commodities sell at their value. Yeah, and maybe about their value plus a certain amount, or else he wouldn't have been able to trace or think about profit. But I don't want to digress too far. Anywho, Nancy's claim, or Nancy's gambit, is that production is one hidden abode. It's not the only hidden abode. And she says that if it were not for the way that capital, and then capitalist, but capital is able to free ride on the polity, on nature, on unpaid labor or care work, that the exploitation of wage labor may still be possible, but it wouldn't be that profitable. Yeah. So where she wants to go in is that you have the hidden abode of production, but you also have the hidden abode of what the state provides under the guise of what's for the public good. You also have, the free work, because labor has to be produced, even from the point of view of capital. The labor comes in a body, that has to be born and raised and taken care of. And we know that they want to pay as close to only what's necessary for that labor to reproduce itself. But of course, that's oftentimes in terms of the money that that the worker needs to buy the commodities that they need for their sustain themselves. But if it were not for all the other work that's either provided for free in the home or in the community, or subsidized by the state, they wouldn't be able to that wouldn't be as profitable. And she also goes into, if capital had to pay or had to be responsible for either for paying for or for replenishing what it takes out of nature, for lack of the natural environment, and how and its use of the infrastructure, and the actual fuller cost. By cost, I mean that broadly understood, not just prices, for the adequate reproduction of the labor force, it wouldn't be that profitable. And of course, then she's able to bring in, ideas about race and gender and regions, because all these ideologies help to rationalize who gets exploited, who gets pushed out, who gets expropriated. All these types of things helps to understand that. Okay, so when she's saying is that capitalism, you have to go from capital to capitalism, you have to look at all the institutions or structures that prop up, that allow that prop up the capital, so the circuit, the social relation, and that as we should know by now, there's a wide variety of structures of accumulation or institutional configurations that fit quite well, or that can prop up or support that circuit. Yeah, which is why capital is so global. Which doesn't mean that it's a happy relationship or a subsumption, formal and real subsumption, but that's the case. So oftentimes when people are comparing capitalisms or socialism with Chinese characteristics, what they're comparing is the structure, the institutional and legal and cultural structure that supports, that manages that circuit. Yes, and that of course changes, and that changes across countries. Or within countries and over time. Yeah, there's a whole branch of research, and I might forget what this is called. but like the regulation school, the regulationists, something like that. And what they've talked about is they've tried to look at changing what they call regimes of accumulation. So so capital goes on, but regimes of accumulation rise and fall. Yes, and there's periods of great flux in between those, while one is dying and one is taking root. All right. So she talks a lot about, and she wants to focus on that, and she wants to say that what's really that, of course, capitalism is historical. So is capital. It just didn't plop down one day fully formed. That it took quite a while to develop, and that's one thing. But what she wants to add to the discussion is that another thing that's historical are these splits between polity and economy, nature and human nature, nature and culture, productive work and reproductive work. That if you don't have to go too far back in time to end up someplace where those distinctions aren't present at all in the consciousness, and aren't and don't have any, just weren't around yet. So that in addition to the class relationships, which are obviously first and foremost, to understand the capitalism as value in motion, as it changes from the money form to the commodity form, back into the money form, and all that goes into that, that it's also an instituted system. And that she adds, in addition to class struggles and class politics, what she calls boundary struggles, which of course are not totally separate. And what she means is where the line is drawn between polity and economy, social reproduction and production and reproduction, social reproduction, and one more, nature and culture. And that one of the frictions is that these now cordoned off parts of society, with the economy being extricated from all of that, and in most cases within when you're ruled by capitalism or the capitalist abstractions, put above and made the most important thing. That what you have is that the values the values that are cultivated and encouraged in one sphere, the economy, start to want to colonize or be pushed out to others, and that this also is a cause of historical development and tension. And so, just to do two examples before I move on, is that. Was it new public management? So I think this started in the 80s, maybe, that the idea the state should be ran like a firm, that the state should be ran, that what's good for the economy is good for the state. So state agencies need to have competition, need to have all these things. So new public management was basically, and one thing that it was trying to institute norms that we would associate, or that kind of cultivate in the capitalist economy, into the government. And then you also have that, of course, anybody that's in education and higher education knows that colleges and universities were also encouraged to treat higher ed as a business. So students became customers, and all that stuff. I don't want to get too far into it, but that's what Nancy is on about. So again, if we were to look at the main institutions in China, so I think people would be hard pressed to say that this circuit, so that capital as the circuit of accumulation, as the social relation, isn't central to China, that China is somehow extricated itself out of this, and or is master of the domain. And I think the latter one's probably more evidence-based. But also, if you look at all the institutions in particular, and I just want to focus in on state policies and rhetoric, that if you look at the state policies and rhetoric, usually, and I just looked at two, was it yesterday or the day before? And it wasn't the last major less economic plan, but it was like from a discussion talking, a discussion of the people who were meeting together to put together this plan. Anyway, probably don't need that detail. However, if you look at that, what you notice is if you look at the policy papers and also the regular press in China, they talk about their economy the same exact way that Wall Street talks about the economy. Yeah. So whereas you'll have the initial kind of, they don't do the land acknowledgement, but they'll do like the Marxist acknowledgement. So they'll mention, Marx, Engels, probably Lenin and Mao. And then they go into focusing on the economy, and it's all about growth. Growth and modernization, growth and modernization, growth and modernization, and of course, maintaining social stability. Yeah. So, which, I don't want to say there's anything wrong with that, but what I want to say is that if you were to think about if you just think of a hypothetical country that is either attained socialism, because I do believe that the government did say that the class war was over. That's done. That's in the past. Yeah, they managed that. Yeah. And even there was this thing, was it a year ago or 2 years ago? I can't remember. There's this website that keeps track of internet censorship, or the parties, the CPC's internet censorship in China. And one of the things they're concerned about is about class antagonism. Yeah. So they don't want to encourage, they don't want people to be causing problems between the classes. Because that causes problems if the class struggle is over. But it's so hilarious that you have a communist party and party state, but they'd be like, hey, ixnay on talking about the class struggle, please, we're communists. That's in the past. It's kind of funny. However, what I want to talk about is that when you look at how the Chinese and people who not just the Chinese in China, but how people, any person evaluates, analyzes, divides up the economy, they use capitalist terms, ideas, abstractions. So that's another puzzle to me. If China is socialist, and the party state is communist, not just in name only, then why is their economy understood not just by themselves but by others in capitalist terms? I think that's a fair question. All right. So in terms of the parallax gap, what that means is that you have, so again, China is the object, yeah? Or and you have certain people look at it and they see they see socialism today. They see super Marxist, communist, vindication, rejuvenation, all of that, because it's been a hard time for Marxist Leninists and Marxist Leninist parties. But they see that. And then the other people will look at it and say, like, okay, well, I see a lot of, in terms of the capital, as I just, how I understand capital and capitalism, I see a lot of that. But the party is still Leninist. Yeah. So there is that. And it does have, of course, a Marxist, Maoist heritage, but it also has about 4,000 years prior to that. So, a lot going on. And rather than tearing or spending some time on this, on the gap between these two perspectives, these two ideas from the same object, what I tend to see is Marxists and also Marxist Leninists in particular want to deny it, want to bargain with it. Yeah. So of course, Stalin already mentioned this in whatever it was, that we have to catch up. That the first order of business for any socialist country is to catch up with the West, or we won't have any chance of obtaining socialism. And that may very well be true. That makes sense. However, that doesn't mean but then to make that what socialism is. So socialism is rapid economic growth and modernization to catch up with the West. Really? Because that's also what capitalism is. That's also what development is. That's also what all the East Asian tigers were busy about. And I would say that's what China's, that's a better objective term or model to put on China, not that it covers it completely, is that if it acts like a East Asian one-party developmental state, why do so many people need to call that socialism, Marxism, communism? I think that's, I find that an interesting question. And I'm hearing the door. Somebody's at the door, so I'm going to have to drop down here for a minute, because if it's, these days sometimes you have to sign for it, and then they take a picture and all kinds of things. So I'm just going to put up back in 10 minutes. But I'll be back in less than 10 minutes, but I'm just going to put this up. I will be back as soon as I deal with the delivery person. Sorry for the timeout. Oh, look, I'm teeny tiny. Oh, hello. All right, so it was for the neighbors. Okay, let me figure out where I was again. Hello, everyone. Okay, so where did I leave off at? Oh, yeah. Okay, and so I realize, of course, that what socialism would look like and act like, and also, of course, even more communism, could only be dealt with very broad strokes because they hadn't been accomplished yet. Yes, until China did, and then declared that the class struggle was over in China. But before then, which is nice, it's over. Stop talking about it, please. Anywho, uh, la 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 la. What am I? Oh yeah. Okay. So, I talked about at length, probably too much, capital and capitalism, but I didn't talk about socialism before I jumped over to why I think that objectively, and if we apply a ruthless critique of all that's existing, regardless of what we might find and how it might make us feel, or how it might upset people, and how they might say we're retarded or compromised or feds or who knows what. That we should, those of us who can, should try to raise our hands and be like, but what about this? Anywho, so what is socialism? I don't want to get into. It's easier to say what I think. It's easier to say what it wouldn't be, or what it isn't, as in terms of what it materially would be. Again, given that, and depending on how you think about China and what was achieved in the USSR, if they ever got to an objective point, they'd say, "Yeah, we're not just building socialism, but we've attained it." So now, on to the next list of historical tasks. So one thing is that you have this capitalist circuit. So you could look at that and you could be like, okay, does this seem to be dominant in terms of, I don't know, industrial policy, in terms of wages, and cracking down on rest of labor, urban development, foreign direct investment in their own, and then what I mean by that is not just foreign direct investment of what goes into China, but China's foreign direct investment, whether in cash or developing infrastructure, the Belt and Road Initiative. Does that seem like this thing is just, not really, not that it has to be disappear, but that it's not dominant? I would say good luck with that, because I think even people who want to say, who really believe that China is objectively, materially socialist, and it's a communist party doing what you would expect a communist party to do in the current context, would be hard pressed to say that China isn't totally implicated in global capitalism. But you could, maybe people have made that argument. I don't know, but I think that would be an interesting one. So that is makes it difficult to say that it's socialist in terms of Marxist socialist. Yeah, in terms of a Marxist understanding of socialism, I realize that there's a variety of socialisms. Okay, and democratic socialism and all that type of thing. However, that's not what Marxists and Leninists are getting at when the ones who want to make the claim that China is socialist and the Communist Party is not just nominally communist, and that they have not just they haven't quietly tried to go away from Marxism. They've doubled down on it, and more than just in retort, more than just name checking. So you have that, and also all the institutions that go around to try to keep this circuit going. Are those not present or diminishing in China? I don't think so. And also, again, the old man, the graybeard, Marx, that we're ruled by abstractions. It's China, Chinese, not ruled by abstractions, as much as people are in the UK and Germany, in most parts, in India, United States, most parts of the world, right? Profit, capital, debt, all these things. Yes. Are we not super worried, or is there still, if I were to watch the media, if I was to watch the news in China, would they not have the stock market? Would they not be talking about economic growth and modernization and all these types of things? I mean, again, so I would say is that to the degree that China is still as ruled by abstractions, capitalist abstractions, bourgeois abstractions, as Americans are. I'll just use that because I'm an American. That it makes it hard to say that it's a socialist country, or that it's really knocking that by 2050 it'll be ready to do socialism, because I guess like the next phase, because by 2050 it's infrastructure and it's all the reserves, all the ducks are going to be in a row, and then it's withering of the state time, perhaps. But I would say that I don't see that anywhere. Or I mean, I shouldn't say I don't see it anywhere, but from what I've looked over, I don't see any evidence of that. But there is quite a bit of evidence for it being, for it having shifted to adopting kind of a one-party developmental state, East Asian developmental state. That started after the Cultural Revolution with Deng Xiaoping, and accelerated after they saw, my guess is after they looked around and saw what was going on in the U.S. after the USSR collapsed, and what was going on Eastern Europe. I think they looked around and thought, this developmental state model seems like something that we should adapt. And like Deng Xiaoping said, yeah, it doesn't matter if the cat is white or black as long as it catches mice. And I want to pick my banner off because it's irritating me. All right, oopsie. Okay. Oh crap. Yeah, so I'll just leave this here. So why? So I would send it. So I'll just restate my claim that I think the China, so the Communist Party of China, the party state, is best understood materially as a one-party developmental state, not a socialist or a Marxist one. And I think everything becomes, if you try to understand what's going on materially, then things become a lot clearer in my mind than if you try to shove what's going on with materially into a socialist, and particularly a Marxist socialist hole with that developmental state peg. So what one-party developmental state captures, and why is it superior to socialism with Chinese characteristics? So it explains things without any kind of mystification. So you have the one-party rule. You still have centralized coordination. You have long-term horizons. So the government the state can set a policy, and that policy is the policy until that. So they don't have to worry about a regime, a different party coming in to power. It's also not a federalist system, so they don't have to fight with. They don't have to sort that out. The major issue with them is between the principal agent issue, to use that term that they have, is getting people, the local administrators, local cadres on the ground to implement the policies in the spirit with which they were designed, I guess is one way to say. So, and they're also able to, there's elite circulation through party channels. So there's a suppression or an absorption of labor as an independent political force. So again, when socialism becomes about economic development and modernization, and the party can say, look, within China, we've resolved the class issue. Then of course that's going to have an effect on labor as a political force. And another thing to look at in terms of if in what way is China socialist, let alone communist, is if I were to go to any factory, or most any factory, whether it be a privately owned factory or from a Chinese privately owned factory, or a factory owned and operated primarily by somebody who's not Chinese, or a state-owned enterprise, the workers aren't deciding how that factory runs. I also don't think that workers are deciding how the surplus is spent or distributed. Also, there's still the housing registration thing that the government has to okay if you move from one place to the other. And again, I don't want to make a normative thing on that, because I can understand why having some control over population movement when you're a country the size of China is useful. I spent enough time in India to understand why that, just instrumentally, without getting into normative things about freedom of movement, is a nice power to be able to exercise, which doesn't mean that people don't move, but that people who do move without that, of course, don't get the benefits of being formally registered in the village or municipality that they currently work in. So that's just another thing that problematizes this adamant statement that China is socialist and that the Chinese Communist Party is communist in not beyond nominally speaking currently. At least at the towering heights. Obviously, it's the party is 90 million people, so not everybody is on the same page, and we're going to get into that on Wednesday. I'm going to get on Wednesday the different what's the right word, factions or cliques or divisions within the party going back since the Mao days. So it's going to be a potted survey. Anywho. But if you look at China in terms of East Asian developmental state, they use markets instrumentally. They try to guide capital. Yeah, so it's not about abolishing capital or even as a long-term goal, but it's about managing it, right? So again, you might have this interesting thing where you have the circuit of capital. You have capital accumulation, so you have that circuit. But that within this system, within this political economy, the state, you don't have capital. You don't have capitalists and financiers pulling the strings from behind the state. The state is able to discipline capital way more than it does in other countries. And another thing that with the developmental state could find itself in is that it could be that they have to nurture capital development, or capitalist development. So that's why if you look back that's where things like infant industries come from, and import substitution programs and all this type of stuff, is that realizing that indigenous or local or national capital or capitalists or capital, the private sector entrepreneurs, whatever you want to call it, need, and these areas also need to develop, so they need to be protected from outside, from being thrown open to outside competition. So of course I'm aware. So, okay, they have that. They can discipline labor, but also capital, and they prioritize national accumulation. So again, you also have this in the States. People, not just in the States, but with capitalism, is that it's not that you have capital, so you have that system, and then you have individual capitalists. So individual capitalists come and go, and of course, some of them get monopoly size and have outsized power, and they can use their money to buy politicians and media outlets and all that stuff. However, that they come and go, right? But it's about maintaining the capitalist circuit, not in particular capitalists, although various politicians, of course, are going to be more, whoever their donors are and whoever is the dominant sector in the area that of their constituency, they're obviously going to have an interest in promoting those interests. And also sometimes you have to make concessions to labor. Yeah. So I'm not going to go too much into that because I think everybody watching probably knows the certain concessions that have been made to labor over the years that have now been progressively whittled away since the whole Tina, there is no alternative neoliberal wave, etc. So China. So if you look at China's industrial policy, it fits the model of the East Asian developmental state. It was export oriented initially when it opened up, massive infrastructure development. You have state capital alliances, but the state maintains the upper hand. So people like to say, and this is true, that that you will see capitalists get taken out of like, I don't know, the Jack Ma guy who was, I think he was the richest dude in China, billionaire, whatever. And he said something and then he was out. He didn't have a public statement for a few months and people were making all kinds of rumors, so capitalists and rich capitalists and do get taken to account, do get held to account in China much more so than they do in the States, of course. However, this isn't how a country treats its capitalists would be a weird definition of communism, because communism, of course, is to get beyond having capitalists, but of course still need capital. Oh, I need to wrap up before I circle the drain energy-wise, so I'm just going to take a moment. Hi, everyone. So let's see. Technology upgrading via controlled openness. So with under Deng Xiaoping in China, especially if you compare it to what happened to East European countries in the USSR, they had a series of special economic zones along the coast where they would invite foreign capital, and then of course also technology and all in this, and have special deals, tax incentives, low labor costs, all this type of stuff to test out how it went. And then those over time grew and grew. And they added also, before they had special economic zones, they had export processing zones, which is exports. And then you had free trade zones. So the zone is, to put our Foucauldian hat on, if you'll forgive me, is an important technology of government. Yeah, the zone, special zones. And so this again is East Asian political economy since, if you look at Taiwan, if you look at Japan, if you look at South Korea, and also Singapore. Singapore is a bit of an outlier, but of course, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan didn't have the communist, didn't have the Communist Party, and also they had U.S. patronage. So it's not an exact. It's not, obviously. I'm not saying it's a perfect fit, but it fits, and it explains China's economic policy and political economy way easier than socialism and Marxism and communism do. If you look at it objectively, would be more argument. And also, this helps explain why the Marxist language persists, or the discourse. So the kind of, to use maybe not the best analogy, like a land acknowledgement. Yeah. So when people get up and do a land acknowledgement, they're really not going to give the land back. Yeah. But they want to acknowledge this. So Marxism and Mao and all this stuff is acknowledged. One party development. So it needs ideological continuity. You need that national, national stories, and as an organizing narrative. So Marxism and Leninism become part of a longer process, which is also why, perhaps is why you have a lot more of this kind of civilizational speak coming in. Also, the more Neo-Confucianism being not sanctions and to also embraced, is that it becomes that Marxism, Leninism, and Maoism become moments in a much larger trajectory of China, and all that gets kind of subsumed with, again, national development becomes the most important thing. And then it's also why you hear talk of the people, you hear talk of the nation, you hear talk of the civilization, but what you don't really hear much about at all, in terms of the policy and the policy making level and its implementation, is working class, proletariat, this type of more, let's say, divisive language that doesn't go with the harmonious society type of thing that we got going on now. So I also would say that state socialism is analytically misleading. So calling China a socialist state smuggles in all kinds of assumptions that I think don't materially hold, even though people may say them, and they may mean them. Because again, state ownership doesn't equal socialism. State-owned enterprises can behave just like capitalist firms. Yeah. So again, if they are ruled by the extractions of capitalism, if they are plugged into that circuit, they can be owned by the state. Does it really matter? I mean, it does. I'm not saying it doesn't matter at all, obviously, because state-owned enterprises have more bandwidth than privately owned enterprises. They can run. They could, the state could decide that it's politically beneficial for them to run at a loss. They could be, encouraged or required to hire more people, and that could, be a cushion for surplus labor, all kinds of things. But my point is that is not a synonym for socialism, Marxist socialism, I would say, at least as I understand how it's been commonly operation or fleshed out. So socialism is defined by class power, not state power. Although there's a lot of slippage in this about people talking about the states. So I'm like, I thought Marxists are supposed to be interested in primarily in class, not the state. But perhaps that's wrong. Marxism is, so it's a stuff. So it's not that the state does stuff or the markets are regulated or that private capital is subordinated. That's a variety of capitalism. I would say not so much a variety of socialism, but that's just a point. So I would say that Marxist socialism requires working class political power, a transformation or an ongoing transformation of social relations, and you would expect, I would think, a decommodification of labor. You don't see China doesn't have any of this. There was this, but again, a lot of I'm talking about China the last 40 years. I'm not talking about China from when the party was first came to power. Okay. So again, I'm confused as to what material conditions or processes this calling it socialist, communist, Marxist, while understanding that is what they use. There's people that use those terms, and that's what they call themselves. But there's men who say they're women, doesn't make them women. No matter how much we call them she's and pretend otherwise. Okay, so state capitalism. So the state also can act as a capitalist or the main capitalist or the super capitalist or like the umpire, yeah, who has to keep things in order, has to not let it get too crazy, yeah. So you don't get things like the financial crisis that you had in the West in 2008. But it does imply that capital accumulate. So the developmental state will subordinate capital accumulation to national development prerogatives. So you want to regulate, you want to control, you want to nurture capital and labor and other, I'll just use those two broad categories in a way, in order to achieve national development. So national development becomes an end in itself. Yeah. And so you do have a significant more amount of political control over capital in China than you do in most other states. And you do have strategic planning, and you do have they do have focus on long-term industrial and infrastructural upgrading. China for sure isn't laissez-faire capitalist. It isn't neoliberal. There isn't liberal, but is it socialist? I don't. Again, my whole point is that of this is that I don't think so. And I'm under no notion that what I think has a material consequence, obviously. But I think that if Marxists are going to be Marxists in more than name only, and not just aesthetically, that then they should be Marxist, yeah, or call yourself something else, perhaps, and be serious. That but the U.S. is doing the U.S. the hegemon. It's crazy. We want that period to end. Think that the multipolar world is on that course, some sort of proto socialist international, all that stuff. But I think that it's important to try as much as possible to call things what they seem to be, not what we want them to be. And again, you're just engaging in propaganda and kind of, sports, your favorite sports team. When you do the really sloppiness of like, well, they are what they say they are. Yeah. So again, if everything was what people say it is, and if appearances were the essence, then not only would science and critique be totally superfluous and unnecessary, most of talking would be unnecessary. What would be the point? Everything is obvious. Anywho, how long have I been going on? An hour and 51 minutes. That is a long time. And a delivery guy's coming up, or a delivery woman. So sorry, people. I'm going to have to drop back down a moment, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to try to round this off so it doesn't get too unwieldy. But I need to go answer the door. So I will be back in a moment. Let me put something up that's maybe interesting. No. Oh, I don't know. Hold on. I will put up something. Don't leave. Delivery. Okay, hi. Oh, one thing that's bad and good. Well, it's bad that about but being far away from the grandparents is they overcompensate by sending way too much crap. Well, my kids wouldn't call it crap, but anyway, I should just be thankful. Okay, let me turn this off. Hide. Okay, so where was I at? Oh yeah, developmental state. Again, a developmental state again. Not again. I don't think I made this clear. That its legitimacy is embedded in it delivering growth. So it's a state that's legitimately comes from, it's managing the economy well. It's providing modernization, and of course that enough of the society feels the benefits of that. Yeah. And as long as that's happening, as long as development's happening, so you got growth or modernization, and there's inequality, inequality could be growing, but as long as the enough of the average person, enough of the average people are feeling it, that is what legitimates the whatever you want to call it, regime, party state, etc., and why they don't have to do what they really don't want to do, which is to liberalize politically to the point of having other parties come into the milieu to make the argument that they could do the development better. So perhaps a let's see, diplomatic way of putting it. And again, even though I'm talking a lot about China, and it's it's a fascinating, never-ending topic, my object of analysis and critique is not China. It's Marxists who want to get very upset if you challenge the party line, and that would be the CCP or CPC. I don't know which one. I don't know which acronym is preferred. Party line of socialism with Chinese characteristics, which is convenient because it absorbs all contradiction, at least discursively, and that it's not just Marxist but super Marxist. That I find that curious, given what we're told or what we expect, Marxists to be. So again, with the ruthless critique of all that's existing and materialist analysis, and to not be moved by people who by the words that they want to hear, etc., and whatnot. So that is my main target. But of course, that requires to make that case, I have to be able to demonstrate how bonkers. I shouldn't say bonkers. Sorry. How if you focus on the kind of actual existing material political economy of China, their position becomes untenable. But that doesn't seem to bother them. They just kind of double down on that, which again indicates that this belief in the CCP and China as actually existing socialism, the living continuation of Marxism, Leninism, all that stuff in the 21st century, of course, is quite personal, and they're attached to that, which I understand. However, so what do I want to say? I want to wrap up this thing about the developmental state and then give an example from Keiju Jin's book about how the curious way this socialist country communist party presents their economic discourse when it comes to the economy. Okay, so we could say that China is best understood, and I would say this is a one-party developmental state that uses markets, capital, and planning instrumentally to achieve national development. Marxism survives as a socialism, communism, all that stuff as an ideology, not as political economy. Or more directly, you could say that as of now, China isn't socialist. It's a one-party developmental state that speaks Marxism because that's the language that legitimizes its rule. Especially you still have people who were alive during the like Xi Jinping, who were alive during the Cultural Revolution. You still have all those the kind of that I don't know what you would call it, like incentive or expectation set. I can't think of my words here, but that it would be and obviously it's worked for them to act like a developmental state, but speak as if they're a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist state. It's worked well. I mean, there's contradictions and there's, I'm sure there's issues, but, objectively, materially, and if you look at the level of modernization, economic growth, and it seems, I mean, I'm not inside China, and even if I was, doesn't mean I could see everything from whatever perch I was on. But it seems like the party seems to be, their hold on power seems to be pretty good. But we'll see. Anywho, I digress. So, and here's an example of one of the ways that you can look at that is how the economy is talked about. How the Chinese economy is talked about both inside and outside of China. And so this is Kyu Jin, sorry. And she wrote this in 2023, the New China Playbook, Beyond Socialism and Capitalism. I have it, but I've only skimmed it. And I picked out this graph. So she wants to compare. And basically what she's saying is that that if you look at with the parallax view, if you look at it from in terms of Marxist-Leninism, socialism, you're going to be quite confused by lots of parts of China, unless you're looking at it completely ideologically. And if you look at it from the point of view of neoliberal capitalism or liberal capitalism, you're also going to see a lot that's confusing to you. And she's wanting to say that it's a neither nor, both and. Something else is in the oven. Yeah. And so concepts take a while to catch up with the material world. So who knows what will land. But I think that while not perfect, East Asian developmental state works a lot easier, covers more than socialism with Chinese characteristics and Marxism. So, what does she say here? So she's comparing this. So this is her first figure in her book. And she says the West's free market economy, and you have the government on top. And then you have mainly they have, then you have fiscal, financial, and monetary levers. And then she divides so in terms of the government's intervention or intervention or regulation of the economy, she picks out fiscal, financial, and monetary. And then with she divides the economy between enterprise and consumers. Okay. And then you have the market economy, which is in that. And then you have the China's hybrid economy. So not socialist or capitalist, but, there's a mix. And that the government involvement is fiscal, monetary, industrial policy, financial, and with state-owned enterprises. And again, she divides up the economy between enterprises and consumers, and she calls this the mayor and market economy because of the larger role that the state plays in the economy compared to what she wants her model of the market economy. And one thing you'll notice, and right away, is there's no class here, right? You have the state, you have the market, and then you have enterprise and consumers, right? And yeah, so that's just something I want to clarify as an example. Okay. And Kyu Jin, her backstory is interesting, I think. Well, it's interesting to me. She was born in Beijing, and when she was 14 or 15, I think 14, she took the opportunity to go to high school, and she must have had really good grades because she went to some, I think it was a private school somewhere in New York, I want to say. Anyway, she went to high school in New York and then subsequently went to Harvard. And her current position is she is a professor of finance at Hong Kong University of, oh my God, Science and Technology, I want to say. Her dad, Mr. Jin, I can't remember his first name. He's the head of the Asian Investment Bank, Asian Development Bank. Yeah. And he was the second. So there was the Minister of Finance in China, and he was whoever the person is behind him. So I don't know, senior minister or vice minister of finance in China, and is a long-term member of the Communist Party. And the reason why I bring that up is that I don't think Ku Jin would write a book about the new China playbook that would get her dad in trouble or herself on the outs with the power elite in China. And so I just want to mention this. This is an example of that. Again, I think you could go through, and it's quite interesting that, and you can make the argument, well, they're integrating the global economy, so they have to use the language of global capitalism, of bourgeois capitalism, right? Or else it'd be very confusing for people who want to, for being integrated in the global economy. But that doesn't explain why in their internal documents and within China, you get the same thing. They do not want to highlight or focus or discuss class. They're fine with talking about imperialism and unfair trade and all this type of stuff when it's between China as a nation and other countries. But they avoid class talk. They just avoid it, from what I've seen and what I've in my literature review to date. And I was going to talk about, I always underestimate how much time it's going to take to get through the program, because funny enough, it's been going on for an hour and a half. And I thought I'd only go for an hour and then be able to take a moment and then come back for comments and questions. But I have to put my kids to bed in half an hour. Anywho, so I'm going to wrap up here, and I'll have to leave. I wanted to talk about multiplication as ideology to avoid focusing on class, and also how and to what extent China is objectively socialist, or building socialism as historically understood with the Marxist qualifier before it, which would get me into a bit of the weeds with Jameson and Zizek, and I think that would be too much to expect of myself and anybody who's still listening tonight. So I'm going to have to make that a separate section, a separate episode. Either tomorrow if I have time, or after the one focusing on the structure and composition of the CCP. So let me just see what I want to end on here. Yeah. So again, I'll bring up the parallax gap. That's what I'll do. Let's see. Sorry, people. I've all of a sudden went on a total. Oh, and I'll bring this up. This is a nice little doodad. How after America, China has the most Starbucks in their company open. So Starbucks opened them. I don't think they were franchised. It used to be back in the day when I lived in China, which was, so it was in Shanghai, and it was for a year, almost a year. Most companies, most foreign companies, there was they had to be joint ventures. So I think 51%, or was it 52%, had to be owned by a state. It had to be state-owned enterprise, or a private by a private entrepreneur, but they had to be Chinese. I think maybe they probably have relaxed that rule. Anywho, sorry. Oh, yes. So, socialism, capitalism of Chinese characteristics, the Chinese parallax. Where that gets at is that it's the same. Obviously, it's the same. It's the same political economy at a material level. But some people look at it and they see socialism, communism, Marxism. Some people look at it and they see what authoritarian, crony communism or something, whatever that term is. And then some people see, they're like, okay, well, clearly socialism of Chinese characteristics is capitalism of Chinese characteristics, which is then perhaps, or then you have Miss Jin, who's like, it's, who knows, it's a historical process. She doesn't use the word dialectic, I don't think, being a good, she's not a Marxist economist. I don't know what kind of economist she is, but I know that she did her PhD and got her PhD in economy, and she's a professor of finance. Anywho, oh my God. Oh yes, or and then when I look at it, or when I look at it now, I think, oh well, I see an East Asian developmental state, but without the U.S. Well, without the U.S. patronage. Although for a long time, when it was before China expanded into more capital intensive industries, the U.S. was happy to shift, or the U.S. capitalists were happy to shift a lot of production over there. And Walmart was probably fine with buying a lot of their stuff that gets sold in Walmart. Was made in China. So I don't know if that's particularly patronage, but they were allowed into the world, or they were added to the World Trade Organization, all that stuff, and probably not out of the kindness of their heart, because of, again, that circuit of capital accumulation, that value and motion relation is global. But I've noticed, again, this is refraining and just summing up now, that a lot of Marxist-Leninists and Marxist-Leninists take this very personal. So if you challenge the story, they really need socialism with Chinese characteristics to be materially a Marxist socialism, a Marxist variety of socialism. They really need that, and I can understand that, because if you're a Marxist-Leninist, given what's gone on with Marxist-Leninism and communism since the dissolution of the USSR, I can understand why you would want to put all your eggs in the China basket. Also, because if you look at the other alternatives, what is it? Vietnam still has a Marxist-Leninist or Leninist party. I should say, well, I'll just say Leninist party. Laos, Cuba, and North Korea. But North Korea is hard, right? Because they shifted. They kind of dropped out the Leninism, and now they have this word called juke or juka or whatever. Anyway, again, a lot of focus on sovereignty, self-sufficiency, and the leader and the state are collapsed into one. The leader, the state, the people are collapsed into one individual. So it'd be hard. That would be a harder sell if you're trying to mobilize people in the West to a socialism and to the Communist Party, and especially if you're a Marxist-Leninist variety, then I can understand why you'd be inclined to want to show China as an example of, don't listen to all the crap you've heard, all the propaganda about socialism and communism, because check out, what's going on in China. And I can understand why that would be harder to do if they had to be like, check out what's going on in Laos or Cuba. And I'm not dogging on Cuba. Cuba's been under a blockade and it's crazy. And, I'm not saying it's their fault. I'm just saying of all the Marxist-Leninist options in the world, it makes sense that they are going to hold on as much as they can and squint bargain and deny and get angry as much as they can, instead of reckoning with, the parallax gap when it comes to what is China's political economy today and where does it seem to be trending. So on that note, I'm going to bid you adieu. I will, like I said, I wanted to go over how going from socialism to socialisms is ironically a kind of a postmodernist, post-structural move, because what you also have had before that was there's not modernity, there's modernities. There's not sexuality, there's sexualities. There's not epistemology, there's epistemologies. There's not knowledge, there's knowledges. You use basically this what ideological function that performs by multiplication. I wanted to focus in on on the case of socialism, and I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do it tomorrow at some point, because for those of you who are with me, I'm circling around the drain, repeating myself, which means I need to say goodbye. So I'm going to say goodbye. Goodbye, people. So thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you hearing me out. Do check out my Substack, because I have an article that's called Socialism, Capitalism with Chinese Characteristics, the Parallax Gap, and Marxist Denial and Anger, Denial, Bargaining, and Anger. I might have taken one of those out on the Substack. Please do read that. I appreciate that. I don't have any paywalls, so it's all, you can look at it, all the stuff. But of course, paid prescriptions, Freudian slip, subscriptions, and also any other kind of financial support are much appreciated, because then I can devote more time to these endeavors. I appreciate people watching, even those who are quite convinced that China is the living embodiment, the actual existing embodiment of socialism, communism, with Marxist characteristics today. I look forward to being, I look forward to hearing your arguments for how I am mistaken, or maybe I made factual errors, or, all that stuff is welcome. And on that note, I will see you guys tomorrow. I'll do the one on socialism to socialisms. And then on Wednesday, if all goes well, it'll be the one that's focused on the CCP or the CPC in terms of its changing composition and policies and sources of legitimation from Mao to now. That's nice, isn't it? I love alliteration, from Mao to now, based on my 2 weeks of intensive literature review. So again, I admit that I am not an expert. All right, bye everyone. I will put on my details. See you later. Goodbye.